Here's some major breaking media news. Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News. They just released a statement. His last show was last Friday, so there will be no episodes of Tucker Carlson tonight or any other night. He is parting ways with Fox News entirely. Briahna, this is huge news. Tucker Carlson has the top-rated cable news show. He's had that show now since about 2016. He was a Fox News contributor going back to 2009. Prior to that, obviously, he had a show on CNN. He had a show on MSNBC. He helped found the Daily Caller in between, which I actually worked for in its kind of much earlier inception. And then committed fully to Fox News, became really their most prominent opinion anchor, being someone ideologically connected to Trumpist populism and Trump's foreign policy and all of those issues. This is huge news, totally unexpected. Obviously, we had the Dominion settlement last week, so we can just speculate about why this is. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation that this is connected to the Dominion lawsuit, although really Lou Dobbs, who no longer works at Fox News, and Maria Bartiromo, who still does for now, and Jeanine Pirro, another Fox person, were more significant in the Dominion stuff than Tucker. But nevertheless, wow, I'm speechless.
So, right, the implication is, I think the obvious implication is that this is somehow connected to the fact that Fox News just lost nearly $800 million as a consequence of the Dominion lawsuit. And to be clear, it's not just what aired. It's not that Fox was trying to avoid potential liability for airing things that ended up not being true. It really was the text messages and behind-the-scene conversations from people like Tucker Carlson, although not exclusively Tucker Carlson, that lended credibility to this argument and legal liability to this idea that they knowingly put false things on the air. That's what the liability is for, not the idea that sometimes newscasters make mistakes or that facts end up being wrong. Certainly, there's been no shortage of fake news on networks that are liberal-leaning, Hunter Biden laptop story, all of this that we've covered even earlier in this show. But that Tucker and others texting about how they didn't believe that the voter fraud claims were real, but still airing segments about it was libelous and something that made them legally accountable. So people have also been pointing to the fact that his Friday show seemed to be rather run-of-the-mill 420 style show as evidence that maybe he didn't know this was coming and that this was sudden.
Bill O'Reilly, when he was pushed out over sexual misconduct allegations, he was not given a final show. He was, taken off, and maybe that was phrased as kind of a suspension, but then it was never. Then that was it. His poster went dark. So right, that would lead one to speculate that it wasn't planned any more recently than this weekend. I mean, look, we don't know for certain that it's connected to the lawsuit. They didn't have to admit. They had to admit that things were said on the network that were not true. But it wasn't. There wasn't a lot of apologizing going on. There was a massive amount was paid to settle the case before it gets to the point where a jury orders them to do something even more painful. So in some sense, I don't know. They weren't totally out of the woods because there were going to be additional lawsuits, but it's not like they weren't made to do this. I don't know.
So,
I truly don't know.
For example, because I know I was speaking in rather vague terms. So, for example, the kind of thing that I think might have gotten more focus on Tucker Carlson specifically is he sent a text on November 9th of 2020 saying, referencing Powell's Dominion claim, saying, quote, "The software, SHIT, is absurd." Later that night, Carlson said on television, quote, "We don't know anything about the software that many say was rigged. We don't know. We ought to find out." So again, that's more of this kind of evidence that I think might have been really difficult for Fox had the case gone to trial, where you have newscasters saying, "I don't actually believe this. I don't think it's credible,"
but
and then having a different
approach. Didn't go to
online.
trial. They avoided.
Because they settled for nearly $800 million. And so if you're internally thinking, is Tucker Carlson worth the squeeze? He's very profitable to the network, but the question is, do you want to continue to have exposure that can get you having to pay $800 million nearly?
I mean, it could be on his part. Maybe he was, again, I'm just totally speculating. Maybe he was unhappy with how things were handled on the Fox News side of it. Maybe he didn't maybe he felt like he was being thrown under the bus, or Fox wasn't doing enough to protect him. Something of that nature. Maybe he felt muzzled by them and he wanted to speak out more about it. Maybe, or the other way, or maybe he felt pressured to play to these claims when he didn't really want to because they put pressure on him and he's mad at them and now he's getting blamed. I really don't know. But this is earth-shattering. This is something I would have never expected at this point. He's their top guy.
There definitely was, as we learned from the Dominion lawsuit discovery, some tension about how to handle Donald Trump, with Tucker Carlson expressing a lot of frustration with the network's view that it had to embrace Trumpism despite differences of opinion about things like stop the steal. So 2 days before the Capitol riot, Carlson wrote to a colleague that, quote, "We are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait." Now we just had Trump and Tucker Carlson sit down a week or two ago for the first long-form interview that Donald Trump gave. And I think there were some interesting questions about how much Tucker wants to be in the position where he continues to kind of carry the banner for Trumpism, whether or not he feels like it is imperiling his own journalistic credibility to have to continue to play that role, whether or not he actually does want to and thinks it's profitable and good, but it's Fox News has decided they're no longer going to do Trumpism all the way.
He just interviewed Trump. He just interviewed Elon. The show was feeling, to my mind, very much focused on not backward looking, very where's the Republican Party heading? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be DeSantis? It looked to me like Tucker and his hour of television every night on Fox was set up to play a pretty significant role in that. So this is
what's going to happen going forward.
It's wild.
If you believe that Tucker Carlson was genuinely frustrated with having to support Trumpism and support Trump, as it were, does him departing from Fox News mean that you're going to get a more unfiltered, critical position on Donald Trump? Does this bode well for Ron DeSantis? Is there another person who Tucker Carlson might kind of get behind politically, or are we just going to get a more impartial, fair critique of all of the figures? It really
depends on who ends up getting that. For instance, if Mike Huckabee was the one who suddenly got that slot, I'm not saying that's particularly likely, then it would be all Trump all the time.
But I guess I'm saying something different.
A theological belief.
I'm not asking what Fox is going to do. I believe that Tucker Carlson's influence is independent and separate from Fox's influence. And what Tucker Carlson chooses to do going forward, presuming that he's not going to go sit in his house in Maine and just play Wordle for the end of all time.
Maybe he's going to run for president.
That he is going to continue to have influence in politics. And if he continues to have, whether it's a podcast or an independent news show or a Rumble show or whatever it is, I'm very interested to see what political takes he's going to have and how much it diverges from the point of view that Fox News has. And is Fox News, as a consequence of what happened in the Dominion suit, going to have a different approach to the primary than they might otherwise have had?
If he wants to still have a significant effect on the discourse, you're right. He absolutely has that ability. And again, from watching his show over the last few weeks, it didn't seem like his enthusiasm for doing this has dimmed whatsoever. So, and as I just said, it's possible. People have wondered. Every now and then he gets included in a poll about who would you support for the Republican nomination. It is possible that he would maybe like to run for president. People have speculated wildly. He's always denied it. He's always said, no, absolutely not. I would never do that. But something like this, again, because it's seismic, makes you really wonder what's going on. So, I'm sure we're going to get more details on why this might be in the coming days. But this is really big news.
Yeah, look, one last thing I want to say is that people really value Fox News. Obviously, it is the most popular news show in America, and Tucker Carlson's was the most or among the most popular of Fox shows. So when there is a division, when two parties are at odds, it's going to be really interesting to see what the audience decides, who the audience decides is in the right here, and if that creates some kind of faction. So I'm very, very interested to see what you guys watching think is going to happen, what is driving this, and whether or not you would continue to want to follow Tucker Carlson and take his advice as a newscaster more or less than the institution of Fox itself,
I will
if
say,
they end up having any conflicts of beliefs or interests.
I mean, he gave a platform to some kind of contrarian that is, for instance, on foreign policy, that is now very much associated with the right, that was to a significant degree his due. Like, it was his personal attitude on those matters was very much not in step with like the old kind of neocon consensus. He did meaningfully shift the foreign policy consensus on the right in his direction, in the libertarian or populist or not the non-interventionist direction. I was on his hour of TV a bunch of times back in like 2018, 2019, I think, when the Covington scandal happened. He had me on the next night to talk about it. He had me on to talk about some foreign policy things where we really did see eye to eye. Obviously, I don't agree with everything that was said on the show or all the guests he had, but he did give a platform on foreign policy to me and some people of my views. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, and so many of his comments that were explicitly critical of Fox News, saying maybe Sean and Laura went too far. And this is what Murdoch wrote. I mean, there was all of this internal dissonance where people were sniping at each other, making judgments of how each other handled various news items over at Fox News. So perhaps it shouldn't be so surprising that there are staffing changes that are the consequence of this. It would be naive to think that the only thing about this lawsuit was that it was embarrassing for Fox as a whole. There are also private emails that are being known to other colleagues, and there's going to be implications for kind of talking badly about each other and potentially about the boss and the broader. I mean,
if they're getting rid of all, Hannity said things about January 6th stuff at the day that wasn't being said, that was different than what was on the show. It's true of Laura Ingraham. So I don't know.
Yeah, one leftist Jeet here actually pointed out that he thinks it's unfair to make Tucker take the fall for the decisions that came from the very top of the network. I think there's something to that, but the top of the network is the top of the network, and they're the ones that get to make the decisions.
And to be clear, I'm not sure that that's what happened, but we'll know more certainly in the coming hours, and I bet we'll talk about this tomorrow and all week. More Rising right after this.